In this video, we'll explore a deeply controversial chapter in Native American history, where certain tribal leaders made difficult decisions to sign treaties that many later viewed as acts of betrayal. These treaties, often negotiated under duress, resulted in land cessions, forced relocation, and the erosion of cultural heritage for Native peoples. However, it's essential to understand that these leaders were often acting under extreme pressure, facing a rapidly expanding United States government with a clear agenda of dispossession and assimilation. For many Native American tribes, these leaders found themselves at a crossroads, caught between the survival of their people and the inevitability of U.S. expansion. While some viewed these leaders as betrayers who sold out their people for personal gain, others believed that they were trying to safeguard what remained of their communities in a time of increasing danger. The decisions made by leaders like William McIntosh of the Creek Nation and Major Ridge of the Cherokee Nation have sparked heated debate ever since they signed treaties that ultimately led to the loss of their people's ancestral lands. In the face of mounting pressure from the U.S. government, these leaders were forced to navigate a complex web of choices. Some believed that cooperating with the U.S. government would provide protection for their people, while others feared the devastating consequences of resisting. Yet, no matter their intentions, these decisions resulted in irreversible changes to their tribe's way of life, leading to deep divisions within their communities. These treaties often set the stage for tragic events like forced removal and the destruction of tribal culture. Today, we examine these decisions not just through the lens of betrayal, but also through the lens of survival, asking ourselves, were these leaders truly betrayers of their people, or were they simply trying to ensure their survival in a world beyond their control? William McIntosh, a prominent leader of the Creek Nation, became a key figure in one of the most controversial moments in Native American history. In 1825, he signed the Treaty of Indian Springs, a document that ceded a significant portion of Creek land to the United States in exchange for financial compensation. The treaty was part of the U.S. government's broader policy of land acquisition aimed at relocating Native tribes to lands west of the Mississippi River. At the time, McIntosh's decision was rooted in a complex mixture of personal ambition and political strategy. He believed that by cooperating with the U.S., he could protect his people from the increasing pressure and violence they were facing from both settlers and other tribes. McIntosh's motivation was not entirely altruistic. He sought to secure wealth and power for himself and his family, hoping that by siding with the U.S. government, he could gain protection and resources. He was a mixed-blood Creek, with both Native American and European ancestry, which positioned him differently from many of the more traditional leaders within the tribe. As such, McIntosh often found himself at odds with the more conservative members of the Creek, who were resistant to ceding any more land to the United States. Despite this, McIntosh believed that the treaty would be the best route for securing a future for his people amidst the overwhelming encroachment of settlers and the U.S. government. However, McIntosh's decision to sign the treaty was met with fierce opposition from many of his own people. The Creek Nation had already suffered immense losses in land and resources due to previous treaties with the United States, and many saw McIntosh's actions as the final straw, a betrayal of their sovereignty, traditions, and survival. To the Creek who opposed the treaty, McIntosh's signing of it was viewed as an act of personal greed, a betrayal that served only to solidify his power at the expense of the tribe's future. His opponents accused him of making a deal with the enemy for his own gain, undermining the traditional way of life and selling out the very people he was supposed to protect. The Creek Nation's reaction to McIntosh's actions was swift and severe. The Creek Council, made up of both traditional leaders and those sympathetic to McIntosh's views, voted to execute him for his perceived treason. Despite McIntosh's efforts to justify his decision as one made for the survival of the tribe, his fate was sealed. In 1825, he was killed by members of his own people in an act of vengeance. His death served as a grim reminder of the internal divisions within Native American communities during a time of immense pressure from external forces. For the Creek, McIntosh's death was a symbolic attempt to right what they saw as a grave wrong, even though it left the tribe fractured and weakened. In the years that followed, McIntosh's legacy became a deeply contentious issue. For some, he was seen as a pragmatist, a leader who tried to navigate the overwhelming power of the U.S. government in the best way he knew how. For others, he was a traitor who had sold out his people in exchange for personal gain. This division over McIntosh's actions and his ultimate fate highlights the impossible choices faced by many Native American leaders of the era. In the face of imminent extinction, cooperation with the United States seemed, to some, the only viable option. But, as McIntosh's tragic end shows, the price of such cooperation could be devastating, both for the leaders who chose it and for the communities they tried to protect. McIntosh's decision is a stark example of the painful dilemmas faced by Native American leaders during the era of forced removal. His story raises crucial questions about loyalty, survival, and the long-term consequences of decisions made under duress. Despite the accusations of betrayal, McIntosh's actions are part of the larger narrative of Native resistance and survival in a period where tribal sovereignty was continuously under attack. His legacy, forever marked by the violence of his own people, remains a tragic reminder of the complexities and heartbreak inherent in these historical choices. The decisions made by leaders like William McIntosh and Major Ridge are central to the ongoing debate about the fine line between survival and betrayal. These leaders, often caught between the interests of their people and the overwhelming force of the United States government, faced dilemmas that were not easily resolved. On one hand, they were pressured by the U.S. government's policies of forced assimilation and relocation. On the other, they were expected to protect the sovereignty, culture, and land of their people, despite the relentless pressure to surrender. For McIntosh and Ridge, signing treaties that ceded land to the U.S. government was not an easy decision, nor was it made out of personal greed alone. In their view, these actions were attempts to safeguard what remained of their people and culture. In McIntosh's case, he believed that cooperating with the U.S. government could secure financial support and protection for the Creek Nation. Similarly, Major Ridge believed that the Treaty of New Echota, which he signed, was the best chance to protect the Cherokee people from total annihilation. However, both leaders underestimated the long-term effects of their actions. While they may have believed that these treaties were a necessary evil in the face of mounting pressure, the result was devastating for their tribes. McIntosh's signing of the Treaty of Indian Springs led to his execution by his own people, as they viewed him as a traitor. Major Ridge, along with other signatories of the Treaty of New Echota, faced fierce opposition from the majority of the Cherokee. The treaty led to the infamous Trail of Tears, which caused the deaths of thousands of Cherokee people as they were forcibly relocated to Oklahoma. The loss of land, culture, and lives could never be undone, and the leaders who signed these treaties were left to defend their decisions, often with little support from their community. The question of whether McIntosh and Ridge were traitors or pragmatists, acting for the survival of their people, is not easily answered. For many of their people, their actions were seen as betrayal, leading to their deaths and the destruction of their tribe's way of life. Yet, for others, these leaders were attempting to make the best of a dire situation, acting as intermediaries in a system that offered no room for negotiation or compromise. The U.S. government's actions left them little choice, and their decision-making, while controversial, was rooted in a desire to protect their people's future, even if that meant accepting harsh compromises. Analysis. The dilemma of choosing between survival and betrayal is one that has haunted Native American leadership for centuries. When a leader signs a treaty, they may be attempting to ensure the survival of their people by offering cooperation in exchange for protection or some form of compensation. However, these compromises often lead to irreversible losses. In the case of McIntosh and Ridge, the treaties they signed resulted in the loss of vast amounts of land, cultural erosion, and the destruction of their people's way of life. These leaders faced immense pressure from the U.S. government, which sought to assimilate native populations and take their land for settlement. In such a situation, what was seen as betrayal by their people could be interpreted as an act of survival in a world where survival itself seemed impossible. The consequences of these decisions have shaped the legacies of Native American leaders, leaving lasting scars on their tribe. These decisions were not merely about individual leadership, but about navigating a rapidly changing world where the survival of entire cultures was at stake. Complex choices made by these leaders continue to shape how Native American history is remembered, with their actions remaining a topic of debate. Were these leaders traitors, or were they simply attempting to save what they could in an impossible situation? The question remains open, as does the painful reality of the choices they had to make. The story of leaders like William McIntosh and Major Ridge is not just a tale of betrayal, but a deeply complex narrative about leadership, survival, and the preservation of culture during a time of immense pressure. Their actions have been the subject of debate for generations, as they were faced with a seemingly impossible choice. Sign treaties that would help secure the survival of their people, or risk total destruction at the hands of a powerful and expanding U.S. government. Both McIntosh and Ridge were caught in the crossfire of a rapidly changing world. The United States was committed to westward expansion, pushing its borders into territories traditionally held by Native American tribes. The federal government employed a strategy of forceful assimilation and relocation, using the power of treaties to strip tribes of their land and sovereignty. Many leaders, including McIntosh and Ridge, faced an agonizing decision. If they resisted, they risked annihilation. If they cooperated, they preserved some form of peace, protection, and, in some cases, personal gain. In the case of McIntosh, his decision to sign the Treaty of Indian Springs in 1825, ceding Creek land to the United States, was motivated in part by personal ambition. He believed that by selling the land, he could secure wealth and protection for his tribe in a time of extreme vulnerability. However, the treaty he signed was deeply unpopular among the Creek people, leading to accusations of treason. For many of his tribe, McIntosh's actions symbolized betrayal. He had sold out his people for his own benefit, and they saw no justification for it. Ultimately, McIntosh paid with his life, executed by his own people, a tragic end for a leader caught between two worlds. Similarly, Major Ridge, along with his fellow leaders who signed the Treaty of New Echota in 1835, faced criticism for their role in facilitating the forced removal of the Cherokee people from their ancestral lands, a tragedy that came to be known as the Trail of Tears. Ridge believed that relocation, although painful, was the only way to protect the Cherokee people from complete destruction at the hands of the United States government. However, his decision to cooperate with the U.S. in this way led to division within the Cherokee Nation, and he too became the target of accusations of betrayal. His actions, though done in the name of survival, ultimately led to devastating consequences for his people, including the loss of their land, culture, and lives. The dilemma faced by both McIntosh and Ridge is a reflection of the immense challenges faced by Native American leaders during this period. They were not just fighting to protect their people, but also to navigate the overwhelming pressure from an outside force that sought to erase their way of life. They had to consider what was best for their people in a rapidly changing world, knowing that their choices would have long-lasting consequences. The actions of McIntosh and Ridge are often viewed as betrayals, but they were also motivated by a desire to secure the survival of their tribes in a time when survival itself was uncertain. The legacy of these leaders is one that raises difficult questions. Were they betrayers of their people, or were they simply acting within the constraints of a world that had little room for the preservation of native culture? Did their actions secure a future for their people, or did they lead to the irreversible loss of land, culture, and life? These questions are not easy to answer, and the debate over their legacies will continue for generations to come.